They fired me while I was coughing blood into a hospital sink. By the time they realized what I owned, they were already trespassing. Let me tell you how I evicted them physically, financially, and legally. If you've ever been discarded like trash by the very people you built up, this story will stay with you. Because this isn't just corporate revenge, this is justice served cold. My name is Camille Doyle, and at 38, I thought I'd seen the worst corporate America had to offer. I was wrong. The call came at 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, while I lay connected to an IV drip in Swedish Medical Center's respiratory ward. Post-COVID complications had landed me there 3 weeks earlier. My lungs refusing to cooperate, my body fighting battles I couldn't see. The phone screen showed my assistant's number, but the voice that greeted me belonged to Morgan Strathmore, Arrowhall Creative's newly appointed CEO. "Camille," she said, her tone artificially sweet, like aspartame trying to masquerade as sugar. "I hope I'm not disturbing your recovery." I pressed the phone closer to my ear, adjusting the oxygen cannula that had become my constant companion. Through the window, Seattle's November rain painted the city in shades of gray. "Morgan, this is unexpected. I'll make this brief." The sweetness evaporated. "The board has decided to restructure the Strategic Development Department. Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. HR will send your personal belongings to your home address." The monitor beside my bed registered my spike in heart rate. A nurse glanced in, concerned, but I waved her away. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your company email has been deactivated. Please don't attempt to access any client files or ongoing projects. We'll mail your final paycheck within 2 weeks." "Morgan, I'm in the hospital. I'm on medical leave approved by—" "The decision is final. I wish you the best in your future endeavors." The line went dead. 45 seconds. That's all the time they'd allocated to dismantling 3 years of my life. I set the phone down with trembling hands, not from weakness or shock, but from the effort of suppressing laughter. They thought they were cutting loose dead weight, a sick executive who'd become more liability than asset. Morgan, in her arrogance, had probably celebrated this moment, finally free to claim my work as her own without the inconvenience of my presence. But as I lay there, listening to the rhythmic beep of medical equipment and the distant murmur of hospital life, I couldn't stop the smile spreading across my face. They'd made their move while I was down, thinking me defenseless, forgotten, disposable. They had no idea what they'd just triggered. You see, I wasn't always in marketing. Before I crafted million-dollar campaigns and built Arrowhall's reputation from the ground up, I spent 5 years as a corporate attorney. Old habits die hard, and I'd never stopped reading the fine print, never stopped planning for the day when corporate loyalty would show its true face. The morphine drip made everything feel distant, dreamlike, but my mind remained sharp. In their haste to exile me, they'd overlooked crucial details. The building in Tacoma they'd been using as a temporary satellite office my building. The campaigns generating 60% of their revenue protected by carefully worded intellectual property clauses I'd woven into every contract. The non-compete agreement they'd made me sign, nullified by wrongful termination during medical leave. A cough racked my body, bringing up more blood-tinged phlegm. I reached for the kidney dish, spat, and wiped my mouth. The nurse returned, her face creased with worry. "Ms. Doyle, you need to rest. Your oxygen levels." "I'm fine," I assured her, though we both knew I wasn't. "Just received some interesting news." She adjusted my pillows, professional kindness radiating from every gesture. "Bad news." I thought about Morgan, probably sitting in my former office right now, feet up on my desk, already rewriting history to erase my contributions. I thought about the board members who'd signed off on this, confident in their power, secure in their corporate fortress. "No," I said, settling back against the pillows. "Not bad news at all." 3 years. That's how long I'd poured my soul into Arrowhall Creative, transforming it from a struggling boutique agency into Seattle's most sought-after marketing powerhouse. But time, I've learned, means nothing in corporate arithmetic. Loyalty is just another word for exploitable. I remember my first day like it was yesterday, January, drizzling as always, stepping into their cramped Pioneer Square office that smelled of burnt coffee and desperation. They'd hired me as strategic development director, a fancy title for someone expected to perform miracles with a shoestring budget and a team of 3. The Norton Industries campaign was my first major win. A failing manufacturing company needed complete rebranding, and everyone said it was impossible. I spent 70-hour weeks crafting a narrative that transformed them from industrial dinosaur to innovation pioneer. The campaign generated $43 million in new contracts within 6 months. The credit: a collaborative effort led by Arrow Hall's visionary leadership. That became the pattern. I'd conceive, create, and execute, while Morgan, then VP of Operations, would present to clients, attend the celebrations, and graciously accept the accolades. At first, I didn't mind. I was building something, and recognition seemed less important than results. The Cascade Health Systems project should have been my wake-up call, a $20 million integrated campaign that required me to live in their offices for 2 months, understanding their culture, their values, their struggles. I wrote every word of copy, designed the strategic framework, even hand-selected the creative team. When it won the Pacific Northwest Marketing Excellence Award, Morgan stood at the podium, thanking everyone except the person who'd actually created it. "You understand, don't you, Camille?" she'd said at the after-party, champagne flute in hand, condescension dripping from every word. "Leadership is about the bigger picture. Individual contributions matter less than unified vision." I understood perfectly. I understood that my ideas were being systematically stolen. My work repackaged as collective achievement while Morgan's signature appeared on every document that mattered. But I kept quiet, kept working, because I believed in what we were building. The breaking point came with the Emerald City Tech Consortium campaign, $50 million, the largest contract in Arrow Hall's history. I'd spent 6 months developing the concept, a revolutionary approach that integrated AI-driven personalization with human storytelling. Every presentation deck, every strategic document, every creative brief originated from my laptop, timestamp evidence I carefully preserved. Morgan insisted on adding her name as strategic consultant on all materials. "For continuity," she explained, "clients need to see unified leadership." What clients saw was Morgan taking credit for innovations she couldn't even explain. I watched her fumble through technical questions in meetings, deflecting to me with practiced ease. "Camille can elaborate on the implementation details," became her favorite phrase. The final insult came during the company retreat last August. Morgan, newly promoted to CEO, stood before the entire staff and outlined her vision for Arrow Hall's future, a vision copied word for word from the strategic plan I'd submitted to the board 6 months earlier. She'd even used my PowerPoint template. That night, back in my hotel room, I made a decision. If they wanted to play games with ownership and credit, I'd make sure the rules were clear. Every contract thereafter included subtle modifications, intellectual property clauses that seemed standard, but contained very specific language about creative ownership reverting to the originator upon termination without proper medical cause. My health started deteriorating in September. Post-COVID syndrome, the doctor said. Unpredictable and debilitating. I pushed through the fatigue, the breathing problems, the cognitive fog that made every day a battle. Morgan's response: "Perhaps you should consider whether this role is still the right fit for your current capabilities." 3 years of excellence reduced to an inconvenience, 3 years of building their empire, only to be discarded the moment I showed weakness. But they'd made a crucial error, one that would cost them everything. They thought they were firing Camille Doyle, the sick executive who'd outlived her usefulness. They forgot they were crossing Camille Doyle, the lawyer who'd spent half a decade learning how corporations devour their own. They forgot that I never sign anything without reading it first. And they certainly forgot to check who actually owned the building they'd been operating from for the past 8 months. Before marketing seduced me with its creative chaos, I spent 5 years at Hartley & Associates, one of Seattle's most ruthless corporate law firms. Specializing in intellectual property and contract law had taught me one invaluable lesson: the devil isn't just in the details, he owns them. My colleagues at Arrow Hall never knew about my legal background. My resume mentioned consulting, which wasn't technically a lie. They saw what they wanted to see: a creative strategist with an uncanny ability to navigate complex negotiations. They never questioned why I insisted on reviewing every contract, why I took photos of every document I signed, Why I maintained meticulous digital records of every project's evolution. The clause that would become their undoing was beautifully simple. Clause 9.3, buried in the standard Creative Services Agreement, stated, "In the event of involuntary termination without documented performance issues or during approved medical leave, all intellectual property rights for projects in development or execution shall revert to the primary creative originator, as established by documentary evidence of first creation." Standard boilerplate, the junior lawyers had assured Morgan. Protection for the company, they'd said. She'd signed without reading, as I knew she would. But the real masterpiece was the Tacoma property situation. When Arrow Hall's main office needed extensive renovation last March, they scrambled for temporary space. I casually mentioned a building I'd inherited from my aunt, a modest 2-story commercial property in Tacoma's revitalized downtown, perfect for a satellite office, convenient for South Sound clients. Morgan jumped at the offer. "We'll draft a standard lease agreement," she'd said. "Actually," I'd replied, pulling out a document I'd prepared weeks in advance, "I have a temporary use agreement here, more flexible for both parties." She'd barely glanced at it. Why would she? I was loyal Camille. Team player Camille. Always looking out for the company's best interests. The agreement allowed Arrow Hall to use the space during the period of renovation of primary facilities, with no formal lease, just a gentleman's agreement to cover utilities and maintenance. What Morgan missed, in her haste to solve the space problem, was that the agreement specified me personally as the property owner, not a corporate entity. She also missed the clause stating that upon cessation of the primary employee relationship between owner and tenant, the arrangement would terminate with 14 days' notice. I'd photographed every page, backed up to 3 different cloud services. The other seeds I'd planted were equally subtle. Every campaign I developed included traceable digital fingerprints metadata showing creation times, unique coding and strategy documents that proved origination, even deliberate typos that appeared in my early drafts and mysteriously survived into final presentations. My personal laptop contained the original files, all time-stamped, all indisputably mine. The Emerald City Tech Consortium contract was my masterwork. Knowing Morgan would claim credit, I'd embedded a poison pill. The campaign's core algorithm, the revolutionary AI integration that clients loved, was licensed through my personal LLC, a detail buried in subsection 47C of the technical specifications. Arrow Hall had unlimited use during the term of Camille Doyle's employment. After that, they'd need to negotiate a new license. I'd even recorded meetings. Washington is a 2-party consent state, but I'd been careful to announce, "I'm recording this for my notes," at the start of each session. Morgan never objected, too busy pontificating to notice the implications. My favorite touch was the email trail. Every time Morgan claimed my work as her own, I'd send a follow-up email summarizing our discussion about my concepts, professional, helpful, and creating an undeniable paper trail. As per our conversation about the strategy I developed, became my signature phrase. The building blocks of my revenge had been laid methodically over 18 months, each piece insignificant alone but devastating in combination. Corporate law had taught me patience, how to build airtight cases that looked like coincidence until the trap sprang shut. They thought they were dealing with a sick woman, weak and desperate. They forgot that sharks smell blood in the water from miles away, and I'd been swimming in these waters far longer than they realized. Morgan was about to learn why you should always read what you sign, and why you should never, ever underestimate a lawyer playing the long game. The morphine was wearing off, bringing the hospital room back into sharp focus. Pain meant clarity, and I needed to be clear for what came next. I reached for my personal phone, the one they couldn't deactivate, and scrolled through my contacts. Time to make some calls. Time to remind them that employment was a 2-way street. And time to teach Morgan that some bridges, once burned, take everything connected to them down in flames. 3 weeks later, I walked into Arrow Hall's lobby at 9:45 a.m. sharp. The security guard, Marcus, who'd always greeted me warmly, avoided eye contact. My keycard, predictably, didn't work. "I'm sorry, Ms. Doyle," he mumbled. "I'll need to call upstairs." "No need," I said, placing a manila envelope on his desk. "I'm just dropping off some documents for legal. Make sure they get this immediately." The elevator ride to what used to be my floor felt surreal. 3 weeks of hospital beds and oxygen tanks had left me weaker but paradoxically stronger. Amazing how clarity comes when you're fighting just to breathe. The reception area buzzed with familiar energy. My former team huddled around the coffee station, probably discussing the Cascade Health Systems renewal I'd been negotiating before my hospitalization. They scattered when they saw me, guilt and discomfort written across their faces. Janet, my former assistant, approached hesitantly. "Camille, I'm so sorry. We weren't told anything, just that you were no longer—" "It's fine," I said, though we both knew it wasn't. "Is Morgan in my office?" "Her office," Janet corrected automatically, then flushed. "She's in a meeting with the Emerald City tech team." Perfect. I'd timed this deliberately. My email access was gone, but the shared drive still showed my ghost. Every project folder bore my initials, my organizational system, my digital fingerprints. Morgan had already started renaming files, claiming authorship with each keystroke. The Emerald City Tech presentation, scheduled for today, now showed created by M. Strathmore. I pulled out my phone and opened the email I'd drafted from my hospital bed. One tap, and it went to every major client, every board member, every industry contact I'd cultivated over 3 years. Subject line: important notice regarding intellectual property and continued service. The door to my former office opened, and Morgan emerged with the Emerald City Tech executives. She saw me and froze, her practiced smile faltering for just a moment before corporate training kicked in. "Camille," she said, voice pitched for the client's benefit. "How wonderful to see you recovering. Gentlemen, you remember our former strategic director." Former? David Liu, Emerald City's CEO, looked confused. "But the campaign is in excellent hands," Morgan interrupted smoothly. "I've personally been overseeing every detail." "Actually," I said, matching her professional tone, "that's why I'm here. There are some intellectual property matters we need to discuss, privately." Morgan's smile became steel. "I'm sure HR can schedule." "Now?" I held up my phone, showing an email confirmation. "Unless you'd prefer I discuss the licensing issues with Mr. Liu directly." She guided me to a conference room, her heels clicking sharp staccato on the hardwood. Once the door closed, the facade dropped. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Collecting what's mine." I placed a printed stack of documents on the table. Every campaign I created, every strategy I developed, every line of code I wrote, it's all documented here, with timestamps proving origination. She laughed, but it sounded forced. "You were an employee. Everything you created belongs to Arrow Hall." "Read your contracts." Morgan, specifically, Clause 9.3 of the Creative Services Agreement, the one you signed without reviewing. I watched realization dawn as she scanned the highlighted sections. Her face went from dismissive to concerned to furious in 30 seconds. "This is bullshit. No court would uphold." "Actually, they would. I spent 5 years as an IP lawyer before joining Arrow Hall. Did you know that—" "No, of course you didn't. Too busy stealing credit to check who you were stealing from." My phone buzzed. Janet's personal number. "OMG, what did you send? Morgan's computer is going crazy with client emails." "You're trying to destroy us," Morgan hissed. "No," I corrected. "I'm reclaiming what you stole. Every campaign with my digital fingerprints, every strategy bearing my metadata, every innovation you claimed as your own, it all reverts to me. You fired me during medical leave without cause. Clause 9.3 is crystal clear. We'll sue you into oblivion." With what grounds I wrote these contracts, I know every loophole, every weakness, every trap I laid. I stood, lightheaded but steady. "Oh, and the Tacoma office you have 14 days to vacate. The termination notice is in that envelope at reception." Her phone rang. "The chairman of the board." She answered, and I could hear his raised voice from across the table. "One more thing," I said as she tried to simultaneously placate the chairman and process what was happening. "The AI algorithm for Emerald City Tech licensed through my LLC. Check subsection 47C. I left her there, phone pressed to her ear, drowning in the consequences of her own arrogance. In the lobby, Marcus gave me the smallest nod of acknowledgement. Outside, Seattle's rain felt like baptism. I'd planted the seeds, Now it was time to watch them grow into the thorny garden of Morgan's destruction. The law offices of Richardson. Kang and Associates occupied the top floor of the Rainier Tower, with views that made you feel like you owned the city. I'd chosen them specifically because Patricia Richardson had been my mentor at Hartley and Associates, and she'd taught me that revenge was a dish best served with proper documentation. "Camille," Patricia said, reviewing my files with the same meticulous attention that had made her Seattle's most feared corporate litigator. "This is thorough." "You taught me well." She smiled, a shark recognizing another predator. "The intellectual property claims are airtight. The wrongful termination during medical leave, they're exposed. But this property situation?" She whistled low. "They've been operating from your building without a formal lease." "A gentleman's agreement," I said. Morgan was too arrogant to read the fine print. 11,200 per day for unauthorized commercial use after the 14-day notice. Patricia calculated quickly. That's 336,000 per month. Industry standard for downtown Tacoma commercial space, plus penalties for holdover tenancy. "They'll argue unconscionability." "Let them. I have emails where Morgan specifically declined my offer of a formal lease at $2,000 per month. She wanted flexibility." Patricia's laugh was pure delight. She's about to learn the price of flexibility. Within 48 hours, Arrow Hall received 3 separate legal notices. First, the intellectual property reclamation. Every campaign I'd created, every piece of strategic content bearing my digital DNA, was now legally mine pending their failure to prove ownership. The burden of proof was on them, and I'd made sure that proof didn't exist. Second, the formal eviction notice for the Tacoma property. 14 days to vacate or face daily penalties that would hemorrhage their cash flow. The notice was posted publicly, ensuring every employee would see it. Third, a personal lawsuit against Morgan Strathmore for copyright infringement, conversion of intellectual property, and defamation. This wasn't about Arrow Hall anymore. This was about her. The response came at 6:20 p.m. the next day. Harrison Walsh, Arrow Hall's lead counsel, a man who'd never lost a corporate case in 20 years. "Ms. Doyle," his voice oozed false sympathy through the phone, "I'm sure we can resolve this misunderstanding without prolonged litigation. Morgan authorized me to offer a generous severance package." $2.5 million, I interrupted, plus full credit restoration on all campaigns, public acknowledgement of intellectual property ownership, and immediate vacation of my Tacoma property. Silence. Then, "That's excessive for a severance negotiation." "This isn't a negotiation, Harrison. It's a notification. Your client stole my work, claimed my ideas, and fired me while I was hospitalized. The price goes up every day you delay." "We'll see you in court." "Looking forward to it." "Oh, Harrison, check your email. I just sent you the metadata analysis for the Emerald City Tech campaign. Notice how every single strategic document originated from my personal laptop timestamps don't lie." Patricia had advised me to document everything, but I'd gone beyond that. I'd hired a digital forensics expert to create an exhaustive timeline of every project, every file, every email. The report was 300 pages of damning evidence. But the real blow came from an unexpected source. Janet, my former assistant, reached out through LinkedIn. "Camille, thought you should know. 3 major clients are threatening to pull their contracts. They're saying if the campaigns weren't really Arrow Hall's IP, they might be liable too." Emerald City Tech was the first to formally request clarification. Their $50 million contract hung in the balance, and David Liu wasn't about to risk his company on IP that might be legally compromised. Morgan tried damage control, scheduling emergency meetings with every major client. But how do you explain that your award-winning campaigns were created by someone you fired from a hospital bed? How do you maintain confidence when the architect of your success is dismantling everything you stole? The board called an emergency session. I knew because Patricia had contacts everywhere, and Seattle's legal community loved nothing more than watching titans fall. "They're hemorrhaging," she told me over lunch at the Fairmont. "Norton Industries already suspended their renewal pending IP verification. Cascade Health Systems wants a full audit of campaign ownership. And the building. They're scrambling. Apparently, they have nowhere to relocate 40 employees on short notice. Morgan's been calling every commercial broker in Tacoma. I sipped my tea. The first real food I'd enjoyed since leaving the hospital. What's their counteroffer? 1 million. Reinstatement with full benefits. And they keep the campaigns but add your name as co-creator. No. Patricia grinned. I told Harrison you'd say that. He actually whimpered. The media hadn't picked up the story yet, but it was only a matter of time. I'd planted seeds with strategic contacts, preparing for the moment when public pressure would add to legal pressure. Morgan had stolen more than my work. She'd stolen my reputation, my health, my trust in corporate loyalty. 2.5 million was just the start. She wanted war. She was about to learn what happened when you attacked someone with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The eviction deadline was 10 days away and counting. The emergency board meeting lasted until 2:30 a.m., according to my source. Morgan emerged looking like she'd aged 5 years in 5 hours. The next morning, Arrow Hall's legal team came out swinging, filing motions to dismiss my claims as frivolous and retaliatory. Harrison Walsh personally led the charge, holding a press conference on the steps of the King County Courthouse. Ms. Doyle's allegations are nothing more than the bitter fantasies of a disgruntled former employee, he declared to the assembled media. Arrow Hall Creative stands behind its intellectual property and its CEO. Perfect. They just made this public. I called Rebecca Martinez, a tech journalist I'd worked with during the Emerald City tech launch. She'd always suspected something was off about Morgan's sudden creative genius. Camille, she answered on the first ring, please tell me you're finally ready to talk. I have 300 pages of documentation proving Morgan Strathmore has been taking credit for my work. Interested. Send me everything. But I held back the most damning evidence, the recorded meetings. Washington's two-party consent law meant I'd been careful, but Morgan's arrogance had been her downfall. In every strategy session, I'd announced I was recording for notes. She'd waved dismissively, too important to care about the junior executive's note-taking methods. Those recordings told a different story than the one Harrison was spinning. They captured Morgan dismissing my ideas in meetings, only to present them as her own to clients hours later. They documented her asking me to walk her through complex strategies she supposedly created. Most damning, they recorded her explicitly instructing me to put her name on my work for consistency. Arrow Hall's counteroffensive was predictable. They offered me $1.5 million to sign an NDA and transfer all IP rights. When Patricia forwarded the offer, I laughed so hard I triggered a coughing fit. Counter with $5 million, I told her between gasps for air, and public acknowledgement of creation, full-page ads in the Seattle Times and Adweek. They'll never agree to that. I know. The story broke on a Wednesday morning. Rebecca's article, "The Woman Behind Arrow Hall's Success Speaks Out," included enough documentation to make Morgan's plagiarism undeniable. The metadata analysis, the email trails, the timeline showing how every major campaign originated from my laptop. It painted a picture of systematic intellectual property theft. Morgan tried damage control, but how do you spin forensic evidence? She released a statement about collaborative creation and team efforts, but the damage was spreading like wildfire through Seattle's marketing community. Then came the knockout punch. Emerald City Tech formally suspended their contract pending resolution of the IP dispute. $50 million, frozen. David Liu's statement was carefully neutral, but the subtext was clear: they wouldn't risk their company on potentially stolen strategies. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet. Emergency all-hands meeting. Morgan's melting down. Half the creative team is threatening to quit. The board called another emergency session. This time, they invited me. I dressed carefully for the meeting, professional but not desperate, strong but clearly still recovering. Let them see what they'd thrown away from a hospital bed. The boardroom at Arrow Hall's main office, they hadn't moved to Tacoma that day, wisely felt like a funeral parlor. 5 board members, all avoiding eye contact. Morgan sat at the far end, her usually perfect appearance showing cracks, smudged mascara, wrinkled blazer, the look of someone who'd been putting out fires for 72 hours straight. Ms. Doyle, the board chair, Richard Blackstone, began. We'd like to discuss a resolution. I've made my terms clear. Your demands are excessive. Your CEO stole my work, claimed my achievements, and fired me during a medical crisis. I placed a folder on the table. This is a preliminary estimate of damages if Emerald City Tech pulls out permanently. Shall I walk you through the numbers? Morgan finally spoke, her voice hoarse. This is extortion. No, I corrected. This is consequence. You built your reputation on my foundation. Now that foundation is crumbling. Richard Blackstone studied the damage assessment. I watched his face pale as he processed the implications, not just Emerald City Tech, but Norton Industries, Cascade Health Systems, every client questioning whether their campaigns were legally compromised. What if, he said slowly, we offered you the CEO position? The room went silent. Morgan's sharp intake of breath was the only sound. I'm sorry, I managed. The board has concerns about current leadership. If you were to return as CEO, with full acknowledgement of your contributions. I looked at Morgan's face, shock, betrayal, rage cycling through her features. 6 months ago, I might have jumped at the chance. Now. I'll consider it, I said. But first, you need to vacate my building. The 14-day notice expires in 4 days. After that, it's $11,200 per day. Camille, Morgan's voice cracked. Please, we can work this out. I stood, steady despite the exhaustion. We could have, 3 weeks ago. You chose differently. As I left, Richard Blackstone called after me. Will you at least suspend the media campaign? I turned back. Ask Morgan about the recording from the August strategy session. The one where she explicitly instructs me to let her take credit for the Norton renewal pitch. Then we'll discuss media campaigns. The door closed on Morgan's strangled gasp. She'd forgotten about the recordings. Amateur mistake. The federal courthouse in Seattle stands like a glass and steel monument to justice, or at least the American approximation of it, on a gray Thursday morning in December. I climbed those steps one careful breath at a time. Patricia Richardson at my side, ready to face Morgan Strathmore in the arena she'd never imagined we'd enter. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread through Seattle's business community that this wasn't just another corporate dispute, this was a reckoning. Rebecca Martinez sat in the press section, laptop ready. Several Arrow Hall employees, including Janet, had taken personal days to attend. Judge Catherine Ostrander, known for her no-nonsense approach to corporate litigation, reviewed the initial motions with sharp eyes. This is quite the collection of claims and counterclaims, she observed. Ms. Richardson, would you like to present your client's position? Patricia stood, every inch the legal warrior who'd trained me. Your Honor, we'll demonstrate through documentary evidence that Ms. Doyle's intellectual property was systematically appropriated by Arrow Hall Creative and specifically by CEO Morgan Strathmore. We have metadata, recordings, and a clear paper trail showing creation, theft, and wrongful termination during medical leave. Harrison Walsh rose for the defense, his usual confidence seeming forced. Your Honor, this is a simple case of an employee misunderstanding the nature of corporate creative ownership. Counsel, Judge Ostrander interrupted. I've reviewed the preliminary evidence. Let's proceed to testimony. I took the stand first. My breathing still labored, but my voice clear. Patricia walked me through the timeline, every campaign, every stolen idea, every instance of Morgan claiming credit for work she couldn't even explain. Ms. Doyle, Patricia said, placing a document on the evidence screen. Can you identify this? It's the original strategy document for the Norton Industries campaign, created on my personal laptop on March 15th at 8:47 p.m. And this, another document appeared. The same strategy, submitted to the client under Morgan Strathmore's name 2 days later. You'll notice she didn't even correct my intentional typo in paragraph 4. The courtroom stirred. Morgan's face remained stone, but her lawyers were frantically whispering. Then came the recordings. Patricia had chosen carefully not vindictive selections, but clear examples of Morgan's pattern. The August strategy session was particularly damning. My voice on the recording. I'm documenting this meeting for my notes. Morgan's dismissive response. Fine, whatever, now, about the Norton renewal. I've developed a revolutionary approach using behavioral psychology integration. Good, but present it as my vision. Okay, clients need to see unified leadership from the C-suite. Just put my name on the deck. I'd prefer to maintain creator credit. Camille, we're a team. Your success is my success. Don't be selfish. The recording ended. Several board members in attendance shifted uncomfortably. Cross-examination was Harrison's chance to discredit me, and he came out swinging. Ms. Doyle, isn't it true you were experiencing significant health issues that affected your judgment? I was hospitalized with post-COVID complications, yes. And these supposed agreements about intellectual property, you made them while cognitively impaired. Patricia objected before I could respond. Counsel is attempting to practice medicine without a license. Sustained. Harrison tried another angle. You were terminated for performance issues, weren't you? I was terminated via a 45-second phone call while attached to an IV drip. No performance issues were ever documented or discussed. But you were frequently absent. I was on approved medical leave. Here's the documentation. Patricia presented the medical leave forms, signed by Morgan herself. When Morgan took the stand, her story began to unravel immediately. She claimed collaborative creation, insisted the recordings were taken out of context, maintained that everything was standard corporate practice. Then Patricia played the killer recording a client meeting where Morgan literally read from my notes, stumbling over technical terms she didn't understand. Client's voice, can you elaborate on the behavioral psychology integration? Morgan's response, I'll have my team send you the detailed specifications. But you created this strategy, correct? You just presented it as your vision. Of course, I just prefer to delegate the granular details. Patricia paused the recording. Ms. Strathmore, if you created this strategy, surely you can explain the basic concept of behavioral psychology integration in marketing. Morgan's mouth opened, closed. It involves understanding consumer behavior patterns and... That's generic marketing speak. The actual integration methodology. Silence. The forensic analyst testified next, walking the court through metadata proving every major campaign originated from my devices. The timeline was undeniable creation on my laptop, then mysterious appearance on company servers under Morgan's authorship. By the time both sides rested, the courtroom atmosphere had shifted. This wasn't a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. This was a creator reclaiming stolen work. Judge Ostrander's ruling came 2 weeks later. I sat in Patricia's office, still breathing carefully but feeling stronger than I had in months. Complete victory, Patricia announced, reading from her laptop. $7.4 million in damages, full intellectual property rights restored, and, she smiled, a formal injunction requiring Arrow Hall to publish corrections in major trade publications. I sagged back in the chair, the weight of 3 years lifting. What about Morgan? Personal liability for $2.1 million. The judge specifically cited willful and malicious appropriation of intellectual property and exploitation of a subordinate's medical crisis. My phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca Martinez. Morgan Strathmore announces resignation, effective immediately. Justice tastes different than revenge. It's cleaner, sharper, documented in federal court records for anyone to verify. Morgan had built her castle on my foundation. Now she could watch it crumble from the ground where she belonged. The Monday morning after Morgan's resignation was etched in Seattle business history. I arrived at the Tacoma property at 7:45 a.m. with Patricia, a court officer, and 2 King County Sheriff's deputies. The 14-day notice had expired the previous Friday. Arrow Hall had ignored it, probably hoping I'd been bluffing. I wasn't. 43 Arrow Hall employees stood in the parking lot, boxes in hand, confusion and anger on their faces. Someone had leaked the eviction time, probably Janet, bless her, and they'd scrambled to collect personal items over the weekend. Harrison Walsh was there, designer suit incongruous in the morning drizzle. This is unnecessary. Camille, we're vacating voluntarily. After accumulating $123,200 in holdover penalties, Patricia noted, plus today's rate. You can't be serious. I handed him the court order. Commercial eviction, lawfully executed. Your client had 14 days to negotiate. They chose to ignore my property rights. Sound familiar? The court officer began the formal process, checking each room, documenting remaining property. Arrow Hall's temporary signage came down, replaced with bright orange notices. Property under court-ordered eviction. A local news crew had arrived Rebecca's doing. No doubt, The optics were devastating. One of Seattle's premier marketing agencies literally locked out of their offices. Employees huddled in the rain. Leadership in chaos. Then I saw her, Morgan, sitting in her BMW across the street, watching her empire's physical eviction. Our eyes met through the rain-streaked windows. She looked broken, aged, her carefully constructed image as shattered as her career. She got out of the car and approached, Harrison trying desperately to stop her. "Are you happy now?" she asked, voice raw. "You've destroyed everything." "I destroyed nothing," I replied, surprised by my own calm. "I simply reclaimed what was mine. You destroyed everything the moment you decided my life, my health, my contributions were disposable." "I made you," she spat. "You were nobody before Arrow Hall." "No, Morgan, I made myself. You just took credit for it." She stood there, designer heels sinking into the wet parking lot, the woman who'd once commanded boardrooms, reduced to watching her former empire from the outside. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. "The board offered me your job," I said quietly. "I turned it down." Surprise flickered across her face. "Why?" "Because I don't want to lead a company built on theft and betrayal. I want to build something honest, something mine." The sheriff's deputy finished securing the building. I held up the keys, my keys, and watched Morgan flinch. "You know what the irony is," I continued. "If you'd just given me credit, just acknowledged my work, we could have built something incredible together. But you couldn't share the spotlight. You couldn't stand that someone else might shine." "I was the CEO. I deserved." "You deserved what you earned. Nothing more, nothing less." I turned to address the gathered employees, many of whom had been my colleagues, my friends. "For those of you who lost your jobs because of this situation, I'm sorry. My fight was never with you." Janet stepped forward from the crowd. "We know. Camille. Most of us saw what was happening. We were just too scared to speak up." Others nodded, murmuring agreement. The narrative Morgan had tried to spin bitter former employee seeks revenge crumbled in the face of their witness. I looked back at Morgan one last time. "You asked if I'm happy. I'm not. There's no joy in watching someone destroy themselves with their own greed. But I am free. Free from your lies, your manipulation, your theft. And that's worth more than any salary you could have paid." The BMW's door slammed. Morgan drove away, leaving behind the building, the employees, the wreckage of her ambition. Harrison Walsh followed, already on his phone, probably calculating billable hours for the inevitable bankruptcy proceedings. I stood in my parking lot, my property breathing the rain-washed air without struggle for the first time in months. Patricia squeezed my shoulder. "What now?" she asked. I looked at the empty building, seeing not Arrow Hall's failure, but my own possibilities. Now I build something real, something honest, something that doesn't require standing on others' shoulders to reach the sky. The news crew approached for a statement. I declined. The court documents spoke louder than any interview could. Morgan Strathmore had been evicted from my building, from her position, from the false pedestal built on my work. Justice had been served as cold as she'd left me in that hospital bed. But unlike her, I could breathe freely now. The rain stopped. Sun broke through Seattle's perpetual clouds, illuminating the empty building that had once housed my stolen dreams. Tomorrow, I'd start filling it with real ones. Today, I simply stood in my own space, on my own ground, owning every breath, every moment, every single thing I'd earned. They fired me. I evicted them. And for the first time in 3 years, I was exactly where I belonged. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If this story of corporate justice resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts or similar experiences. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success, it's reclaiming what was always rightfully yours.